I've really always wanted to have a moment wherein I come around to Shin'ya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer, the sequel to his much adulated original film from 1989, and have a moment wherein, this is often described as an inferior picture. Some even just tarnish it, dismiss it, just sort of very smug, just tarnishing of it, as I've said. But I I've always wanted to sort of fight against that belief, and I find that a little bit difficult too, because I think Tetsuo 2 is quite distractingly inferior and less interesting to the first film. Not that it's entirely uninteresting, although I mean the original is such an accomplishment. I'm almost annoyed by it, how brilliantly creative, inventive, convicted it is, how much hard work went into that, and how disciplined they had to be, and how it all just so gloriously paid off. There's few films superior to it, as far as I'm concerned, sincerely. And I just think Tetsuo Body Hammer. He's trying to, obviously he was still fascinated by these ideas and wanted to explore them in a different avenue, and perhaps we could have appreciated this film more were it not related to the original Tetsuo. If it had just been called Body Hammer, perhaps, and it was a sequel to the original, it could still be a sequel to the original Tetsuo, but it didn't necessarily need to advertise that fact, although it was probably easier to get the film more, well, advertising slash viewers toward it. No one would just want to watch a singular Body Hammer. Like, I even though a film like A Snake of June or even Gemini from Shin'ya Tsukamoto later, they're much more well received than Body Hammer, but I'm willing to bet more people have seen Body Hammer because it's titled before Body Hammer is in fact the subtitle to a film called Tetsuo 2. Now, maybe the film ought to have been shot in black and white instead, but I also appreciate the idea that a director doesn't want to repeat themselves. I simply think it's not as interesting or compelling a prospect as the first film's ambitions. I don't blame Tsukamoto, because after the first Tetsuo, do you really want to? I mean, one, you don't want to repeat yourself as an artist, and two, you can only imagine slash actually can't really imagine, work Tsukamoto put into Tetsuo. Few films seem as slaved over and it's just challenging to work on as Tetsuo the Iron Man. These guys were arduous. These guys dedicated their lives to pulling this thing off. And would he really want to go through all of that again? Especially if it just meant mimicking the first film, perhaps in a inevitably limp way, if you're just creating a carbon copy of it. Instead, he does something quite different. But as I said, I don't think the results are as iconic. And this isn't to say that I think Tsukamoto never topped Tetsuo the Iron Man. I mean, whether I prefer any individual films he put out later is that's, I guess I would question that. Although what I would insist is that he's directed and released some absolutely superb films in the years since Tetsuo the Iron Man. I inferred before 1999's Gemini, 2002's Snake of June. Both of those are quite brilliant. And I'd recommend a film titled Kotoko, which is a candidate for his best film, along with Tetsuo the Iron Man. I'll make that claim. A remake of Kao Nishikawa's 1959, I think it is, classic Fires on the Plain. He's given it the same title and released it in 2014. A very good film, I think. I mean, if it's not as good as the original, it's a very, very tall order, frankly. Killing in 2018, I had the pleasure of seeing in the cinema at the Japanese Film Festival in Sydney in, late 2018. And it was absolutely spellbinding. I thought it was utterly brilliant. And he's got at least one new film out. Yeah, Shadow of Fire 2023. I'll have to get on that at some stage. But anyway, the point I'm making is Tetsuo 2 is cinematographically interesting to a point, but it doesn't feel as distinct or idiosyncratic as the first film. I don't know if it's the photographic sheen, the fact that this sort of culture was becoming a bit, and this sort of scene artistically was becoming a bit more commonplace, and it's sort of just whirling in on itself stylistically. You have characters dressed in a certain leather fashion and looking like certain punk-esque gangs, and you're like, oh, okay, so it's just sort of one of these films now are just, another one of these weird Japanese films, and not like something that makes all those films appear very tame by comparison, which Tetsuo at one time does to all the films that kind of preceded in that weird sort of abrasive, crazy J-horror bracket of that time, underground cinema. But in any instance, I've always wanted to believe in this one. I'm going to check out the third film again at some point in the future, see how that holds up. Bullet Man from 2009 came out years later, but I've always wanted to be the guy to say, nah, actually, Tetsuo 2, that's the underrated genius sequel. You guys have been missing out all these years, and I was the one who had to tell you. But I'm not going to be the one to tell you, and hopefully there'll be someone to tell me what I'm missing with Body Hammer. And it's not even that Body Hammer does anything particularly wrong. It's perfectly fine, sort of weird crazy film, whatever you want to refer to these as. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's just not enough there, whereas there is nothing but in Tetsuo the Iron Man, a series of relentless questioning going on within your mind. Have I seen a better film than this? Not remotely thinking that during Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer, for whatever that's worth. But again, like I said, it's perfectly worthwhile product in its own right. I'm going to pause it here, see if I've said anything worthwhile. Thanks, everyone.